died about 10 years ago, and I saw his wife for a while.
Here's the next chapter.
Our new president, Hillary King, here at Temple. That's her mother who died.
Yeah.
Oh, that's your mother? That's Hillary King's mother?
Yeah. Morning.
Morning, sir.
How's everybody?
Good.
We have a chapter 13 going around.
Okay.
I don't know how do you flip these around. There's an easy way to do it, right?
Just pull this out the top.
Oh, it goes at the top.
She had some kind of foot surgery, so she can't. So you dropping it off? Well, I told her I'd bring it up. Now she got me some.
So we're already
I can always. I really do want to be like you.
Were you here last week?
Such a match. I sent you a text this morning. Did you get it, Mike?
Yes. I'm sorry you can't make it.
Yeah. Okay. Things I got to goose there.
Okay.
But we'll do it next week.
Yes.
If you text me tonight, let me know when you're there.
Beautiful.
I hope you were okay. You weren't sick.
So welcome everybody. We finished chapter 12 last week, and chapter 13 is a really beautiful other piece on the Beinoni, where we get back to some of the questions, lest we thought those questions from chapter 1 were rhetorical all those months ago, right? They were not. So now he's going to get back to chapter 13 and answer a fair number of them. And that's really his style. Every question that he asked, he will, during the course of the whole Tanya, answer it, even getting down to a single word in some of his statements, right? Like the word me'od, very. The whole chapter on, well, now we'll show you why it's very close, not just close. And so all of his choice of language, as we'll see, is very well thought out. So in 13, we'll answer some of the questions about the Beinoni that we had at the beginning. We'll also look a little more about the level of the Beinoni, and we'll also see a more technical description of why it is that the mind rules the heart, as we learned in chapter 12. So that's what we're getting to. But we kind of got into some really juicy discussions at the end of chapter 12, and I'd like to take a little bit of time and just sit with them a little bit more deeply before we go on. So we'll get to 13 today, but I want to take a little time to review, because we hit some amazing points near the end of the last class. We didn't really, I think, have time to illuminate them as well as we could try. So if you remember chapter 9, we looked at the struggle between the two souls and how one is in the brain mainly, one's in the heart mainly, and then they fight it out. Chapter 10, we looked at the definition of the tzaddik and the different types of tzaddikim. 11, the definition of the rasha and the different types of rashaim. And then chapter 12, we found the definition of the Beinoni. So who can define it in 30 seconds for me? A Beinoni is what? We say, give me the, yeah?
He never does anything wrong, but sometimes a thought pops in his head.
Okay, good. And that gets, why does the thought pop in his head? Because?
He's a Beinoni.
Which means?
Not a tzaddik.
Which means?
Trying to be
He's still the
tzaddik.
battle, isn't he?
This thing, right?
Yeah.
So inside, outside,
The
right?
fight's still going on.
That's going to be our main definition, is that the garments, all the behaviors, thought, speech, and action is just like a tzaddik, call it 100%, every time altruistic. But the insides, the definition of the soul, the identity of the soul, the attributes, the intellect and emotions, those are just like a rasha. So that's the definition we should be able to, what's a Beinoni? It's that, right? Garments have become like a tzaddik, but the attributes are still just like a rasha. The Yetzer Hara is just as strong as with you or I suppose. Right? And then we learned that a Beinoni is never a rasha once in their life, ever has been, never will be. A little tricky, I'll leave it to you what your most comfortable explanation of that is, whether it's about a state of commitment, where now that they've reached a state of commitment, they've never, as a Beinoni, done things they never would, or whether it's the balance of the souls and the equilibrium, as we discussed a few times. We looked at the idea that A Beinoni does have moments where they're like a tzaddik, which happen during prayer. And I highly recommend, as I've repeated a few times, that everyone who's learning with us, whether here or remotely, find a point in the morning, whether it's with a minion or on your own, where you pick, say, the Shema, or perhaps the Shema and the Amida. And if you need help finding text, please text me, or email me, and find one moment that's going to be your sort of the highest point in your day for this technique. You need that anchor. You need that point where you reach up as high as you can, you find a beautiful container, and that, for a Beinoni, that actually has them in the state of a tzaddik, where there's no struggle anymore. For someone like us, that at least gives us a high point for the day, and it still leaves an impression for the rest of the day. Yeah, so for a Beinoni, that could be the moment when their Yetzer Hara goes sort of dormant, because they create this love, perhaps, and then they attune to the divine chokhmah that's heightened at that time. And it's like they have no Yetzer Hara, but when they're done praying, typically the Yetzer Hara wakes up again, and it's back to business. So it's like what you can imagine.
So, the Beinoni, for all its thoughts, speech, and action, looks like a tzaddik.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
So, but inside, they're still struggling.
yeah.
Do they know that they're struggling?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, right? And we'll get to that, right? That's why
Yeah.
Rabbah said, for instance, I'm a Beinoni, even though he had no internal struggle. But the typical Beinoni is described as being 100% aware that
So they are aware that the
Yeah.
struggle is always going on.
that when they're praying,
So
they have these.
If the struggle's still going on, then their thought is not a Beinoni.
Well, no, the struggle does not extend into expressing in volitional thought. So if this struggle extends into volitional thought, and now I've spent 10 minutes,
Then they're no longer a Beinoni.
that's not a Beinoni. That's someone whose garments, because thought is behavior for us, right? And it's this you got to remember. Thought is behavior for Kabbalah. It's something your soul puts on and takes off like a shirt, right? So once I'm actually volitionally thinking about something, if I'm daydreaming about whatever, now I'm a Rasha, right? So now you're back to the game of trying to control your garments. So Beinoni, the struggle precedes thought, and they will have stuff drop into their head, but they will push it with both hands immediately, right? So their will does not allow, the divine soul does not allow thought to become a garment. Yeah, good question. Right. Then, no, Beinoni,
Because if you've never done anything wrong, you will almost have to be born that way.
so yeah, let's not confuse the two. When we say a Beinoni's never sinned, it doesn't mean chronologically when they were a Rasha, before they were Beinoni, they never sinned. It doesn't mean that once I've sinned, now I can never be a Beinoni by definition. It just means once they've reached this state of a Beinoni, they're a different person. It's like they'd never sinned. Yeah, but a Beinoni is through hard work, through a lifetime of application and self-growth. A Beinoni, everyone is born with the potential to be Beinoni, every single one of us, but very few actually reach it. It's something that you work at. All right, and then we learned about the brain ruling the heart. This is a key concept, that because of the nature of how we're created, my mind can rule my heart, not by achieving some state or level, not by reaching some state of deep wisdom. Simply, that's our wiring. I should know whatever's going on, my mind can control my heart, maybe sometimes over several weeks, maybe in exactly that moment. But in whatever way we're talking about, the mind actually has precedence and rules the heart. And that's going to be a major tool we're using in all the techniques, whether it's the long-short path, the short-long path, other meditations. And a beautiful piece about wisdom surpasses folly, which shows us a little about why the brain rules the heart, that wisdom is better than folly, the same way light is better than darkness, in all the different ways, and that there's no struggle, darkness is just the absence of light, when light's there, poof, and that a little light can illuminate a lot of darkness. So there's not really a battle between light and darkness. And if we could see more clearly, we'd see there's not really a fair battle between wisdom and folly in our consciousness either. And then we finally, at the end, we learned about that the Beinoni will even guide their thoughts to the extent where they won't express anger to somebody, another person, who's even done them wrong and perhaps deserves anger from them. Right? And this is a key piece. that even when somebody is clearly being inappropriate with me, just any neutral person would look and say, wow, this person's really out of line. Well, Cantor Small should really, tell them a thing or two, right? I'd be perfectly justified to do it. Especially in that situation, I should know, how does he say, I should display disproportionate love and suffering to the furthest extreme, right? So even if somebody is really causing me inappropriate grief to the furthest extreme, I should display them disproportionate love, right?
Can you give an example of that?
Okay, I'm driving down the street and somebody decides they want to cross, I guess we all can, right? I'm driving down the street, somebody decides they want to cross on a red light, and they walk in front of me, and they look at my face and they start yelling at me, even though I didn't honk at them. And then they start pointing and yelling and this and that. Here I am sitting in my car, right? I have the right of way. This person crossed in front of me on a red. I let them go, I didn't do anything, and now they're yelling at me. So who would say I'm in the wrong? I've done nothing, right? Perfectly fine for me to roll down my window and say, learn how to cross the street, Buster, or whatever I might say, right? Or worse, right? So find your situation in your life, any situation like that where I've done nothing, they're being inappropriate. Specifically in that situation, I should smile at them. I should give them all the time they want. I should not respond with any anger. In fact, I should do anything I can to make their life easier.
Isn't that an abnormal reaction?
It's a very abnormal reaction, right?
Form of kindness.
Because nefesh b'amit, the animal soul, is our normal reaction. And nefesh b'amit is going crazy. How dare they? Who do they think they are? Don't they know I have the right of way here? I'm in my car. Right? So the normal reaction is human, nefesh b'amit. Just they're yelling at me. I should imitate them and yell back. Now we want to create an abnormal reaction, which is the divine soul's reaction, which says, even when someone is being seemingly negative towards me, I should display love. And why is that? Because we want to actually emulate Joseph in how he conducted himself with his brothers.
So people who are not acquainted with Kabbalah might think we're a little nuts.
I'll tell you, I heard a story from somebody about label, and this isn't towards a person, but he was arriving in town for one of his talks, and his luggage didn't arrive on the ramp, right? And if I were in some other talk and my microphone and my guitar and my music didn't arrive in my luggage, I'd be freaking out, right? I mean, that's the normal reaction. And apparently he was just having the best time, sitting around waiting, looking. Finally it showed up, but he was not flustered in the slightest, right? So I would see that person. I'd say that's a little, he doesn't seem to be knowing what's going on around him, right? He's not with it. That's a bizarre reaction. But he has really worked and internalized this, where he says, everything happening to me is for the best. Everything happening to me is divine providence. And that's the key. Nothing negative comes from divine providence.
So that gives him a plus in the column, and if the Lord follows that, he gets a plus for that.
We say that yes. Especially
Well, not only that, it makes you feel so much better. I mean, people say, you feel good getting it out and yelling at that person, but really you don't.
Yeah.
You feel much better just, giving them kindness back.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean I let someone actually harm me, right? But I can stop them from harming me while still showing them kindness. You can. I mean, I can be just as firm, but not angry and not mean.
Today's climate, if you talk back to somebody, they're liable to pull a gun or something.
Okay, that too, yeah. So let's look at the deeper reason just one more time. We talked on this.
Yeah.
Why was it that Joseph was so kind to his family and his brothers after they tried to kill him? Right?
Because he realized that they did him a favor. Because
Exactly.
by doing what God had intended him to do, he ended up being where he was to be
Yeah.
able to save the Jewish people.
Exactly. Right. So to a neutral observer, these brothers throw him in a pit, want to kill him, sell him as a slave. It's a horrible thing. He'd be totally justified, getting back at them once he had power over them years later. Totally justified.
Didn't he throw them in jail at first?
He tested them a little. He didn't really throw them in jail. He fed his brother and treated him quite well. Yeah. But he probed them to see. Okay. He probed them to see whether they had changed. So he did want to know what he was dealing with here. But he genuinely saw, and he said it to them, you thought you were trying to harm me. But God was actually doing a goodness to me. God was actually sending me to Egypt to save the whole Jewish people. Everything that happened to me was positive, was beautiful, and so my genuine feeling is, I really want to thank you. It's not just that he really wanted to you let him have it and he was controlling himself. That's a lower level. He genuinely said, whatever you thought you were doing, that's your business. That's between you and God, and if you need to do tshuva for that, that's your business. That's nothing to do with me. But everything that happened to me was divine providence. If it looked like a pit that had snakes in it, it didn't matter. That was my pathway to being the vice president of Egypt and saving the whole Jewish people. And so I want to thank you for doing it genuinely. Not that I'm controlling my real reaction. That is my real reaction. And if we can take that approach with life, it's such a powerful stance to change any stress, any negative situation. That's what it means really to try and be a Beinoni. It's not just, I'm not letting my insides express. It's over time I'm changing my insides and transforming them so that I really see the world as divine providence. And my genuine reaction becomes, oh, thank you. Thank you for crossing the street. I guess I needed to sit here a little while longer and learn some Torah in my mind or just practice not being angry or whatever. So good, thank you. And it connects to the point, I don't remember who asked, how is it that you relieve the tension? Right? We describe the Beinoni as being 100% on the outside and maybe 20% on the inside, right? So I take my thought, speech, and action, my garments, I get them up to 100%, but still on the inside I'm a Rasha. I'm like, I'm really comfortable being a Beinoni here. This feels great, right? Every time my animal soul tries to like give me some idea, I just push it away. I don't do it. Every time I have an urge to do something, I control it even in thought. And here I am being a Beinoni. Someone asked, how do you relieve the tension? And part of it has to do with, I kind of said we're going to get to it in chapter 19, 18, when we start the short long path. But I want to be fair. We've already learned a few techniques for how you deal with that tension of the outside and the inside being different.
What do you think a psychiatrist would make of this?
I don't know. I'm sure there's many fields of psychiatry. And Label's a psychiatrist, and he endorses this fully, so I'll go with that. Right? So the first one is what we've already learned, the mind controls the heart. The same way that the mind controls the heart in any particular instance, right? I want to eat that whatever, and my mind just says I'm not going to, and I think about the exact opposite, and I don't eat it, right? No matter what's going on, my mind can control my heart in that moment. It can. And if I let myself off the hook and do it, I've actually decided to do it. It's not that I was out of control. It's not that I couldn't help myself. My mind just didn't control my heart. The same way I can do it at any moment, I can also do it over time. And over time, the mind can actually change some aspects of the attributes of my emotions. So it's not that the Beinoni can never do that. Once I'm at a point where my thought, speech, and action is being guided directly by my mind, over time now, the inside maybe start at 20, after a month it's at 23, after another month it's at 26, and slowly it comes up to get closer to the outside. So one of the ways that we relieve the tension is over time, my mind also controls my heart by bringing my insides closer to my outsides. But that's a long, long process. But one thing we should keep in mind is we are neuroplastic, right? The brain's not a piece of rubber that you gotta really hammer at it for a month to change anything. The brain is fluid. Every time I respond differently to a situation, we know now from psychology, I change the brain directly and immediately. Now, maybe that the groove, so to speak, that's this deep just goes this deep. Tiny, tiny change. But the change is immediate and it's completely plastic. So the moment I say, I'm going to respond this way, even though my inside says this, there is an immediate change. It might be so gradual I don't consciously notice it, or that it doesn't consciously change my urge the next time it happens. But rest assured, whenever you make a different choice, you've directly changed yourself, and in some way that's progress. You may not feel it yet, but there's great spiritual value in simply saying, I'm gonna get a little closer to where I want to be on the inside. And over time, trust me, you can take individual aspects of your internal psyche and you can transform them and bring them from really, really nefesh b'amit and move them to nefesh elokit. You can, even if you're not a Beinoni or a tzaddik.
It's a new normal.
New normal, right? And we notice in my experience, if I take some particular pattern, and I say, I'm going to focus on that, I'm going to change it, and here's my strategy. After 3 weeks of grief, now I find the pattern is I won't say broken, but the pattern's not as strong anymore. You feel it dissipate. And after maybe 6 weeks, a month and a half, now it's my new normal, and now that's just who I am. And now something where in the past it would have gotten me 80% or 70% of the time I would have messed up. Now 80 or 70% of the time I behave the way I'd like to. So you really can still transform and relieve that tension over time with hamoach shli olev. My mind can change those aspects of the inside. That's what we're working on. That's one. A second one is also what we learn, which is for a Beinoni, these moments of prayer, for a Beinoni, give them a moment like a tzaddik. So even though the Beinoni for the whole day is struggling with their urges, when they get up in the morning and say the modani and give a little bit of tzedakah and sit with a sitter and engage and communicate with the infinite, they really, the struggle goes away. And that is also a way of relieving the tension. That the whole day they may be experiencing this tension, but those 40 minutes or however long they take of prayer, really it's a reprieve. It's a moment of peace, and they really do experience a higher state of being where their normal urges are just immature and they wouldn't consider them. You might think of it like, for us, because I assume no one here is a tzaddik or a Beinoni yet, right? For us, it's a little bit like, say your kids said, it's your grandkid's 5th birthday or 10th birthday, and we really want to come and visit you for the birthday, make it special. We're gonna come in. We're gonna spend the weekend, whatever, and you can arrange whatever fancy, wonderful, great things for your grandkid that you want for their birthday. How special! So here you go, and you're finding this present, and you're making reservations at this restaurant, and you're arranging this thing, and you're spending all this time going and finding, and you hit a bump, and you get past it. You might spend days and days and days arranging the perfect birthday weekend for your grandkid, and you're gonna love it, right? All the time you spend, it's just you're doing it for them. You're imagining the joy they would get. It's you're filled with joy. There's no tension in you about waiting online, to make the reservation, or about the present was the wrong one. You got to return it. That stuff doesn't even touch you because you're just imagining what a great weekend you're going to have with your grandkids and how much joy they're going to have. If I were to say, you know what, I don't have time to plan the weekend. Let me get a party planner. And they'll do it for me, right? I'll tell them, do this, this, this. They'll make the arrangements. They'll buy the stuff. It'll all be ready. If this party planner were to do the exact same thing that you were doing, for them it'd be a grind. It'd be work, right? Oh, the reservation didn't work out. Oh, now I got to go get this thing. Oh, it has to be this present. What a drag. For them, it's like changing a flat tire. So the same exact activity, if you're doing it like a party planner, in other words, it's for a paycheck, now it's a struggle. Right, it's a struggle to do it. If you're doing it because it's your grandkids and you want them to be happy, it's a joy. There's no tension whatsoever. So for us as well, when we get up and we say the Shema or whatever, even 2 minutes, you'll find that those moments where normally there's a struggle in life, all those struggles, it just rolls off your back because now you're doing it because you want the Ein Sof to be happy. You want to give nachas to the Ein Sof the same way you want to give your grandkids nachas, and it's just you're in a higher functioning state, right? It wouldn't occur to you to think it's a waste of time to go find the exact perfect present because they're going to be so happy. I love doing it, right? And so the moment of prayer becomes like that. Your relationship with the Ein Sof becomes like that, and the whole stress of trying to be a better person, it vanishes during those times because you want God to be happy. Why would? Of course, I would not express this or indulge in that or whatever, of course. Now then you go into the day and maybe you get caught up in your normal routine and you find yourself doing stuff, but you always have that memory, I'm here to give nachas to the Ein Sof the same way I give nachas to my grandkids, and all the rest is just icing, right? So even if for us we're not a Beinoni and we're not a tzaddik in those moments can put us in a higher functioning state where all the push and pull of my garments versus my nefesh be'amit, it's not a problem. In fact, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah, understanding that too is so key because, let's say the kid got sick and couldn't come for the weekend.
Oh.
you still had all that joy in planning it, and you realize that, you know what, that's not as important as the joy. You know, the kid will be fine, but I had all this joy.
Okay,
And you move on from that.
it's another challenge, right? Was I really doing it for them or for me, right? If they can't come now, am I angry and upset, or am I just happy for them?
Right,
Yeah.
I mean, if you lose the loved one, you know. I mean,
God
you
forbid,
realize,
yeah.
Fred, how do you feel?
well,
That's the next
you gotta
test.
be happy.
You know, you tell me, right?
Right, you gotta realize that God has a plan.
Yeah.
So prayer is for the purpose of making the Ein Sof happy or for the anchor?
Both.
But for both.
Both. Yeah, but the highest, I mean, tzaddik really does
Tzaddik is
it.
prayer.
Tzaddik does it because who needs an anchor? I want to make myself better for who, right? I just want to bring God joy. All I want is joy for God. There's no me anymore, right? For us, now I'm thinking, wow, I'd like to improve myself. I'd like to get closer to God. I'd like to be better for people around me. Let me find an anchor. So for us, you know, it's a mix, perhaps.
So maybe that's the difference between a Benoni and a tzaddik.
Yes, a complete tzaddik.
Yeah.
There's no more spiritual growth. There's no more, I want to be closer to God. There's no more burning, fiery love. It's just whatever God wants, that's my will and my pleasure.
Right, and you have to realize that if you're doing it for yourself, then it's all about me again, and you don't have enough bittul.
Yeah, so luckily there's plenty of spiritual growth left after you've mastered this stage, right? And like I finished, even though this is a nice question, like how do we resolve the stress of being a Benoni, right? And keeping my garments at 100% when my inside's at 20% or 10% or whatever, that's not really the challenge that you and I are working on, right? If you're honest, I mean, if I'll be honest, a lot of the time I notice myself expressing, especially in thought, but also sometimes in speech and even in action, things that whether traditionally I'd say definitely that's Rasha business, or whether for my own standards I'd say, whoa, that's not who I want to be, that was a moment of weakness. And that kind of happens a lot. And for me, the real work is taking maybe, say 25% of my garments that day were self-centered, trying to get it down to 20%. Or trying to take some area where I'm pretty self-centered in this area, let me take this area and go from 90% to 10%. Right? And if we're honest, our work is we're not at the level of Benoni and dealing with the stress of what that means, that all day I'm controlling every thought and not letting myself even have one word of gossip. Really, our work is, okay, I pretty much let my animal soul express freely a lot of the time, and let me find areas where I can improve that, right? So that's not really our question, is how to deal with the stress. Although, when you're dealing with one thing, you're saying, I'm going to change this, you do experience tension that will ease over time. All right, good. So that was the end of 12. 12 is a big deal and key to understanding what we're aiming at here, being a Benoni. Let's start 13. We're on page 191 in Lessons in Tanya. So in the previous chapter, the Alter Rebbe described the spiritual profile of the Benoni. In the Benoni's heart, said the Alter Rebbe, evil desires may often arise, but his divine soul constantly prevents such desires from finding expression in actual thought, speech, or action. On the contrary, these three soul garments are the exclusive domain of the divine soul and are utilized by the Benoni only for thought, speech, and action of Torah study and the fulfillment of mitzvot. Vazeh yuvan l'shon mamar rabbeinu zichronom levracha. Benonim ze v'ze shoftan, perush yetzer tov yetzer hara.
Accordingly, we may understand the comment of our sages that Benanim are judged by both their good and evil inclinations. Both judge him and dictate his conduct. As scriptural support for this contention, the Talmud cites.
And so this is one of the statements he made, that a Rasha is judged by their evil inclination, a tzaddik is judged by their good inclination, and a Benoni is judged by both their good and their evil inclination. And he never really explained what that meant or how that answered all the questions we had in chapter 1. So now we're going to get to what that means. Dichtiv ki yamod limin evyon lehoshia mishoftei nafsho.
As it is written, He, the Almighty, stands at the right hand.
Well, I'm going to throw you in jail, even though, it's just because you're poor and you're in this situation. So we're really talking about life and morality. But he's now saying poor in the sense of not spiritually refined. So a poor person, someone who doesn't have control over their impulses, someone who's still in this struggle, someone who's still in the world of, the Rasha and the Beinoni. So what does it mean? The Ein Sof, the Almighty, stands at our right hand and saves us from the ones that judge our soul, and those means plural, right? So it's not that one entity is judging my soul, it's that more than one. In this case, the two, right? So the Almighty standing on our right hand, saving me from both the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, the two of them that are judging my soul. So we're using this to get to the answer of what this means. Okay, we thus find?
No.
We thus find that the Beinoni's inclinations are described as his judges. Now were the term Beinoni to be understood in its simple, literal sense of one who has equal history of good deeds and bad. It should more properly be said that the Beinoni is ruled by both inclinations. For one to sin, his evil inclination must rule him. For him to be good, his good inclination must rule. The Beinoni who supposedly does both must be ruled and not merely judged by both. However, according to the explanation of the terms Beinoni given in the previous chapter, it is clear that indeed the Beinoni is merely judged by both inclinations, not ruled by both, as shall be explained presently.
So the key is we assume that that both the Nefesh Elokit and Nefesh B'nai judging us means that they control us, that they decide what we're actually going to do. They say no, we didn't say a moshlim. We didn't say they rule you. We didn't say they actually determine your actions. We just say they judge you. And what does a judge do? Especially in the context of a Jewish Beit Din, you get 3 judges. It's always a minimum of 3, and then each of them gives an opinion. And usually, in fact, there's even a way of deciding where one of them is put in charge of exploring the yes, and one's in charge of exploring the no, or the guilty and innocent. And they want to defend that and look at it as clearly as possible. And the third is the neutral one that decides which one of them made a better case. But often, even if that's not the system, often you have one that says, they're guilty, one that says they're innocent, and one that is the deciding vote. But what each one of them does, they don't determine not one of them determines what the actual verdict is. They just give their opinion. I'm one of 3 judges, and I think it has to go this way. I'm another one. I think it has to go this way. Okay, I'm the 3rd judge, and I say, and that's the Almighty that's standing on the right side of us. Right? That's the 3rd judge. But those first 2 judges, neither of them determines where the case is going to go. In other words, in my consciousness, I have my Nefesh B'amit that says, yeah, yell at this guy. My Nefesh Elokit that says, treat them with abundant kindness. But neither of them determines what I'll actually do. They just put their rulings on the table. They said, these are my opinions, and it's not yet decided what I'm going to do in thought, speech, and action. Neither of them actually controls me. They just judge me. They just have given 2 opinions. That's all that's going on.
So the Ein Sof is the jury.
The Ein Sof is the 3rd judge. Yeah. If you like, yeah. ולא אמרו זה וזה מושלים, חס ושלום.
No, that our sages did not say he is ruled by both the good inclination and the evil, God forbid.
כי שיש איזו שליטה וממשלה ליצר הרע בעיר קטנה, אפילו לפי שעה קלה.
Because where the evil nature gains any rule and dominion, albeit momentarily, over the small city, whenever the evil rules one's body, likened to a city which both the good inclination and the evil seek to conquer.
נקרא רשע באותה שעה.
One is deemed wicked, Russia, at such times.
And so if it were true that I am ruled by both my evil and my good inclination, as a Beinoni, if I were a Beinoni, that means that my good inclination rules me half the time, my evil inclination rules me half the time, and I spend half the time doing productive, wonderful, altruistic things, and the other half the time doing horrible, self-centered things. And that's not what a Beinoni is, obviously. Right? So this has nothing to do with the Yetzer Hara or Yetzer Tov controlling my behavior, my thought, speech, and action. This is all about, there's a process that happens very quickly and eternally where each of these inclinations gives its ruling. Bang, bang, they're on the table, right? I'm in a situation, suddenly someone says a word to me or something happens, right there, they're on the table. And usually the nefesh elokit one hits first, right? Sorry, behemit. You know, my animal instincts hit in, my emotions kick in, and I got that opinion on the table. I should do this and say this and think this. Then there's that still quiet voice that comes in a moment later and says, you know what, maybe reconsider, maybe do this, right? Maybe think about being more mature. And now both these opinions are on the desk of my consciousness, and I've yet to actually have a sustained thought, right? My rational process is yet to decide, this is how I'm going to define this, this is what I'm going to think about, this is what I'm going to say and do. And I have total freedom. I don't have to follow either of these rulings, right? They're on the table. And one cannot really supersede the other at that state, right? They're just opinions. They cannot control anything if I don't let them.
So you shouldn't react or respond too quickly. You'll let these things permeate and percolate.
100%. A big part of shifting behavior is taking a moment before I respond, and that's the attribute of hod. Right? If we learn the different sefirot, hod is acknowledgement, where I leave room to really look more closely at what's happening around me and have a more mature response. And in fact, I've mentioned Label has his students do an exercise where for a week you wait, for a day, a week could be, for a day you wait 5 seconds before you answer anybody anything. To get yourself in the habit of not just going with that gut reaction and just getting into the back and forth, but stop. Look at what my two judgments are on the table. Consider, do I really understand what this person is doing or saying, or why they're doing or saying what they're doing or saying? Or who do I want to be in this situation? Take it all in. And that attribute of hod leaves a little gap. So someone that's really masterful, you know, if you're talking to a Beinoni or a tzaddik, they may just be in a normal conversation, but that hod, they always have that little gap where they're saying, okay, whose judgment am I following here, right?
I tried that for a while.
Wasn't it fun?
It's you can't do it.
On the
You
phone,
literally can't.
especially
You
on the
can't.
phone,
You can't.
can't
5
do it.
seconds seems like forever to wait.
Yeah, but a lot of guys stutter, and while they're stuttering, they're percolating.
Oh yeah, that's a tool sometimes too. You can use that. You can, you know, the thing is, and you're holding the place where you're thinking or you want to speak, but you want to process it. You can do that too, but more clearly, hod is just,
Just quiet. It's just impossible. You can't do it.
Especially on the phone.
It's hard to do.
and then I answer. Right? That's a long way.
Well, but it's so important to do.
Oh.
Yeah. So yes. So back to our text. So neither of my inclinations rules the Beinoni. Right? They're just judges. That's a key distinction to make. Every one of those impulses, no matter how ugly, no matter how automatic, no how long-standing, it's just a judge saying, you know, this, in my opinion, small ass should think, say, or do this. It's on the table. There it is. I back it up with my arguments, and there it is. You know, but they do not rule what I actually think, speak, and do.
So the third judge is the person, not the
I mean, you know, you're there.
You're
You're considering.
decision.
Yeah, you have to take initiative, right?
Free will.
But you're the actor, right? You're the actor. You're not the judge in this scenario, right? I mean, I have one side of me that really feels this is right, another side feels this is right, and I'm there. That's you're talking about the intellectual soul is there, observing the whole thing, trying to make sense of it.
And what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You know, you have to come to a decision.
Yeah. So you have to take the initiative of your free will, and that's your intellectual soul actually, to decide to try and lean towards the divine soul, lean towards mature responses, and then you're going to get help, as we'll see, if you make that decision. Rather, right? אלא היצר הרע אינו רק על דרך משל כמו שופט ודיין האומר דעתו במשפט.
Rather, the ego inclination in the Benoni is no more than, for example, a magistrate or judge who expresses his opinion on a point of law.
So it can be a very neutral thing. That's, okay, I got your opinion. Very nice. It's on the desk. ואף על פי כן יכול להיות שלא יהיה פסק הלכה כך למעשה מפני שיש עוד שופט ודיין החולק עליו.
Yet in fact, his decision is not necessarily final, for there is another magistrate or judge who disagrees with him.
Right? I have your opinion, and I have his opinion. and I have her opinion, I have his opinion, right? So here I am, and I can just take a neutral stance and say, well, at the very least, I can't really be sure which one's right? I mean, so why would I act immediately, right? At the very least, let me say, let me take a moment and determine which one of these is really the mature reaction. That's just sort of the neutral, logical stance. Of course, if you take the spiritual stance, we know which one is right, and the struggle is asserting that, right? But I can't say, well, I lost control, I had to do it, my evil impulse made me. No, it doesn't control me. It just gives his opinion. That's all it is. וצריך להכריע ביניהם בהלכה כדברי המכריע.
It then becomes necessary in order to formulate a binding decision to arbitrate between the two, and the final verdict will rest with the arbitrator.
So he calls it the arbitrator here. ככה יצר הרע אומר דעתו בחלל השמאלי שבלב. Similarly, in the battle between the two inclinations, the evil inclination states its opinion in the left part of the heart, and it creates an evil desire in his heart and demands that he act accordingly, thus rendering judgment as to his future conduct. So we know what that feels like. Here I am in that triggering situation, and my emotions want me to think, speak, and do all this stuff, right? That's the opinion of the judge of the nefesh bamit. ומהלב עולה למוח להרהר בו.
From the heart, the desire ascends to the mind for contemplation. This ascent is automatic. Whenever a desire is awakened in the heart, the brain will contemplate.
So this really mirrors what Label teaches about the order in which our psychology responds to events. That the actual neural wiring of the older systems of the brain are quicker and fire faster than the higher rational functions of the brain. So when I experience a trigger, the emotional reaction fires slightly before the intellectual process that moves in. So I really do experience the emotional hit first, and then the intellect comes in after, and usually if the intellect is just there to rationalize how I'm feeling, now Nefesh Bamid is control of the emotions, and of the intellect of the Nefesh Bamid is controlling the brain, and I can find any rationalization for why I'm the most noble person in the world for yelling at this person, or for taking this, or for doing this, or eating this, right? But that's the order. So first, Nefesh Bamid fires. They have a response in the heart. Second, the brain now says, oh, looks like there's an emotion down there. What do we think about that? But the brain, that is the domain of the divine soul. And you can allow your brain to just be hijacked by the Nefesh Bamid and just rationalize that emotion. Or you can stop and say, okay, this is the headquarters of the divine soul. What do I really think about this trigger, and what do I think about this impulse? And that's where the divine soul can always challenge the Nefesh Bamid. If I assert it, if I say that's just one judgment of the Nefesh Bamid in my heart, now that I'm actually conscious of it, I have control over what I think of. I have control over how long I take before I respond. I have control over everything. And now I'm going to make sure the divine soul gets to put its judgment on the table too. Every time, for every trigger, for every thought, for every word, for every action. I can do that at all times. So that's the order. First, Nefesh Bamid has the emotional reaction. It rises up to the brain. The mind says, oh, okay. Now Nefesh Elokit comes in and says, hold on a minute, this is not exactly other-centered. I think the opposite. We should think, speak, or do this. And now we can have those two judgments on the table. And now we're into possible Beinoni territory, right? And now it's a stalemate, right? Because you got the brain saying one thing, the heart saying the other. And now we see why it is that the mind always controls the heart in situation. It's because of what he's about to describe. We did immediately. Where were we? Contemplation or?
Immediately.
ומייד חולק עליו השופט השני שהוא הנפש האלוקית שבמוח.
Immediately upon its ascent to the brain, it is challenged by the second judge, the divine soul residing in the brain.
Okay, now you're in the brain. Sorry, Nefesh Bamid, right? In the heart, you could push everybody around. You could act like you're the only one who knows what's going on. You could, overwhelm the system. But now you're up here in the brain. This is my territory, right? The divine soul flows here first. I rule this roost, and I'm gonna sit this emotion down. I'm gonna look at it, calmly and carefully and rationally, and I'm gonna decide, okay, maybe it's a good idea to yell at this person crossing the street in front of me. Maybe that's the best thing I could do, but maybe not. Maybe there's a better response, right? המתפשט בחלל הימני שבלב מקום משכן היצר טוב.
Which extends into the right part of the heart, where the good inclination abides, for example, reveals itself. The good inclination is actually the voice of the divine soul's emotional attributes and is hence active in the right part of the heart. The good inclination thus battles the evil, ensuring that the latter's passion not be realized, for the, quote, opinion of the good inclination is that all of the body's faculties and organs be utilized only for the matters of holiness.
All right, so it feels like, in the emotional realm, how should that be so powerful? This still small voice and this intellectual thing, I know this is right, and I feel in a quiet way it's the right thing to do, but boy, I want to let this person have it, right? Why should this even be an even battle? In fact, it's not an even battle, and the mind can always control the heart because of what we're about to learn. Although in the emotions, the nefesh b'mit is the bulk of the emotions, the nefesh elokit is just a kind of quiet, abiding voice in the right side of the heart. The reason the mind rules the heart is because the mind is the first place where the light of the Ein Sof flows into our consciousness. That's where it lands. And so even though it feels emotional, like it's just a still, quiet voice, and there's all this turmoil from the nefesh b'mit, in fact, the light of the Ein Sof is entering through consciousness, through the mind, through the nefesh elokit, and from there it extends to the right side of the heart. And the quality that light has over darkness, even though it's a still, small voice, even though it's like this tiny candle flame in this huge, dark cave, that's enough, because light and darkness are not equal. And the moment I let that light in, even though it only appears in my emotions as, if I really sit and look at it, it's the right thing to do. It's not what I feel like doing, but I feel like it's right, even though it's not what I really want to do, right? Once I let that in, now all that anger, all that self-centeredness, whatever it is, it can just dissipate. It can just deflate like a balloon. It had no real substance. Right? Because light has a quality of advantage over darkness, and that's where the Or Ein Sof enters into consciousness. Through Chokhmah, through the divine soul, first in the brain, and then it extends into the heart. So as long as I'm asserting the mind will have that advantage, and no matter what judgment the animal soul has made, the divine soul's judgment will win over, and the mind will rule the heart. Because of this final arbitrator, right? והלכה כדברי המכריע הוא הקדוש ברוך הוא, העוזרו ליצר טוב.
The final verdict rests with the arbitrator, the Holy One, blessed be He, who comes to the aid of the good inclination, enabling it to prevail over the evil inclination.
כמאמר רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, אלמלא הקדוש ברוך הוא עוזרו אין יכול לו.
As our sages say, man's evil inclination gathers strength daily, and if the Almighty did not help his good inclinations, he would not overcome it, his evil inclinations.
והעזר היא ההערה שמאיר אור השם על נפש אלוקית.
The help that God grants him is the glow of divine light that illuminates his divine soul.
להיות לה יתרון ושליטה על שכלות הכסיל ויצר הרע כיתרון האור מן החושך כנזכר לעיל. That it may
gain superiority and mastery over the folly of the fool, the evil inclination, a dominion, paralleling the superiority of light over darkness, as stated above.
Right, so this is the technical explanation, the spiritual dynamic, why the mind can rule the heart. Right, the mind rules the heart because God is actually helping us. God is that third judge. And God as third judge is the same way saying it's God's light that's actually flowing into the divine soul, that's allowing the divine soul to overcome the animal soul. It's kind of the same thing, right? How is God helping us? By sending a ray of divine light into my soul. That's saying, this is what you're here for, right? You're here to help other people. You're here to cause oneness in the world. That's going to be your deepest joy, right? So it's kind of one and the same thing. The reason why the mind can rule the heart is because the divine soul enters through the mind, and the light of the Ein Sof is there, and that is, so to speak, that third judge that says, okay, animal soul says this, divine soul says this. I wonder what the third judge is going to say. Right? I wonder who they're going to agree with if I let it come to that. Right? So all I have to do is I have to make sure both judgments are on the table. I don't really, at the end of the day, have to control myself. I just have to assert that I'm just going to at least make sure both souls get to state their opinion. And if I do that, maybe I'm not really strong enough on my own to overcome whatever habit or weakness or whatever. But if I just do that and I say, okay, I really want the divine soul to be the result here, but all I can do is say, this is the opinion of the divine soul. I'm waiting.
That's passing the buck.
Oh, well, I know.
It is.
How so?
It's not taking responsibility for yourself. It's saying, okay, put it on the table and, okay, come help me. You know.
You think that's passing the buck?
Yeah. I think your own free will.
But
is
actually,
to-
you're using your free will to
Yeah.
make the decision.
Yeah, that's right.
Because
Your
you think
free will
this is
has
what
to make
God
the
would
decision.
want.
We assume that, so how do we know what God would want?
Well,
We never know.
Well, you have to learn.
The bigger picture.
You have to learn, right? I mean, God says don't murder. It's pretty clear, right? So I know that. I put that,
know.
right? That we know.
Other
So
things
now,
we
God
don't
forbid,
know.
I feel like murdering somebody. I got these one judgment, right? And maybe I can't stop myself from murdering this person at this moment. And I say, okay, what does my divine soul think about this? Do not murder, right? I know what God in the Jewish tradition says. I know it very well. But maybe I'm going to lose my control. Maybe I'm not. Okay, who's the third judge? And if I'm honest, there's not that much of a difference between me asserting my free will to do the right thing and me acknowledging that that right thing is a ray of the divine light that's in my soul. They're kind of the same thing. Because what is my soul? What do we learn my divine soul is? It's Ein Sof anyways. So if I'm deciding to do what the Ein Sof wants, that's basically God helping me to begin with. Because the Ein Sof is not separate from the divine soul. You know what I mean? So when we're discussing it, I know it sounds like maybe I'm just saying, oh, let God drive.
That's part of us. That's
Yeah.
what influences.
So we're trying to strengthen that being, that aspect of myself that really is just Ein Sof. So these are all different ways of describing the oneness that happens when I realize my soul is just really a part of Ein Sof, and that's all it wants to do is the will of Ein Sof. And so of course I'm going to be helpful to other people. And I'm going to assert my will to do that, but whose will is it? If it's the will of the divine soul, it's also the Ein Sof's will. They're not separate, and as a tzaddik, you kind of experience that all that's happening is Ein Sof anyways. But as a Rasha, now I'm saying, okay, there's me, and there's the Ein Sof, and there's divine soul, and who's going to have their way? So he's giving us, who naturally separate all these things up, and I see myself as separate from the Ein Sof and have my own free will, he's giving us a way of getting back to that state where really I'm allowing the light of the Ein Sof into my soul and to have dominion over thought, speech, and action.
So that's your reality, your morality.
It's my morality. My morality, I have free will, and I can do the wrong thing and the right thing, and I don't live in a world where I'm a tzaddik and you know, I have no other option. Of course I could sin, right?
Yeah, so that's like Joseph when he runs from Mrs. Potiphar and he tells her why. You know, because
Right. So
God,
that picture, yeah.
brings in God.
So for us, I mean, when you're really dealing with something that's really an addiction or whatever, right, I think that can be reality. I don't have the strength to overcome this, or I don't think I have the strength to overcome this now, right? That can be a reality. I think that's powerful. And specifically in that situation, you know, maybe in every situation you're right, I don't need to leave it to God. I can just be mature. I get that. But people do face things that they feel like they don't have the power to control now. And I think this is very, very effective for that, to say, you don't have to control it. You just have to make sure, give the divine soul its say, and then there's a third judge in the mix, around the mix, over the mix, that's going to say, if you've done your part, if you've done your best and allowed the divine soul to put its judgment on, I'm gonna tip the favor. I have the third vote. And that's also a powerful stance. I think if we've ever been in a situation where there's something you felt out of control over, I can control what my mind actually thinks and decides. Even if the mind is now struggling with the heart, I can direct the mind to the exact opposite of what the heart wants. And if I do that, and if I keep doing that, guarantee you, Hashem's going to come in with a third vote and say, good, small ass, you did your part. I'm going to help you be a better person. It does happen.
And it becomes easier and easier the more you do it.
Thank God, yeah.
And also, I mean, it's like you said, addiction. That's the first step of the 12 steps.
Yeah.
In a 12-step program. It's, my life's a mess, and I'm going to give it over to God.
Yeah, that's a very powerful new stance to take. That I'm not here alone.
And changing behavior, and with the help of God, it becomes easier.
Yeah. Good. Let's do a few more minutes. You give a few more minutes? Can you give me that?
Sure.
אך מאחר שהרע שבחלל השמאלי בבינוני הוא בתקפו כתולדתו להתהוות תאווה לכל תענוגי עולם הזה.
Yet, inasmuch as the evil in the left part of the Balaam's heart is in its native strength, craving after all the pleasures of this world.
Right, but so doesn't change that my nefesh b'amid is still always going to give its opinion, going to argue it forcefully. I'm not changing that judge. That judge is there giving speeches, backing up his opinion. This is why I should do this. We haven't changed the judge, and we may not have the power to change that judge. That judge is always going to be giving those opinions. It's like the Supreme Court, right? They're on for life. So you appoint somebody, and you're going to be hearing from them for decades. ולא נתבטל במיעוט לגבי הטוב ולא נדחה ממקומו כלל. It's me? Yeah. And is neither so minute as to be nullified before the good of the divine soul, as with the tzaddik, nor has it been displaced from its position to any degree. It's just as strong. רק שאין לו שליטה וממשלה להתפשט באיברי הגוף.
But merely lacking authority and power to become diffused throughout the limbs of the body, to cause them to do, speak, or think evil, nor is the evil's lack of ability attributable to the Benoni's efforts, for his evil, like that of the Rasha, retains its native strength to pervade the entire body. Rather, the evil is powerless, merely
מפני הקדוש ברוך הוא העומד לימין אביון ועוזר מאיר לנפש אלוקית.
Carl, it's merely because of the Holy One, blessed be He, who stands at the right hand of the poor man, helping him and irradiating his divine soul so that it may be able to prevail over the evil.
Right, so yes, the Beinoni always makes sure the divine soul gets its opinion, but then it relies on, so to speak, the third judge, and it can't cancel out, it can't negate, it can't unseat the judge of the animal soul that's always going to be there. So now we're going to get, finally, the answer to this big question. At the beginning, the Alter Rebbe said, you're taking this vow, try and be tzaddik, and don't be a Rasha. But even if the whole world says that you're a tzaddik, think of yourself as a Rasha. And he asked, how is that possible? Which one should we consider ourselves? Wouldn't you be depressed if you consider yourself a Rasha? What's going on here? He's finally going to answer the question of how that paradox is worked out. לכן נקרא כרשע, כמאמר רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה אפילו כל העולם כולו אומרים לך צדיק אתה, היה בעיניך כרשע.
Therefore, the Beinoni is described as being Rasha, like a Rasha, but not actually a Rasha, as in the statement of our sages. Even if the whole world tells you that you are a tzaddik, be in your own eyes like a Rasha.
ולא רשע ממש.
He should not regard himself as an actual Rasha, for the Mishnah admonishes, be not wicked in your own estimation. Moreover, regarding oneself as a Rasha hinders one from serving God joyfully.
And so here's this beautiful moment where for 13 chapters we've been puzzling this question, think of yourself as a Rasha. And finally when we get to it, it's one letter that he's redefining and saying, no, not think of yourself that you are a Rasha, but think of yourself as a Rasha, but not actually a Rasha. So you're like a Rasha. And that's how he resolves it, right? That I do consider myself like a Rasha, because like a Russia, I still have that judge that's giving its opinions. My animal soul is like a Russia. I'm always going to have those instincts. So in that sense, I am like a Russia, but I'm not, God forbid, an actual Russia, because I'm not letting that similarity to Russia spill over into thought, speech, and action. So that's why he says, even if the whole world says you're a tzaddik, think of yourself kir Russia, and what is this person who is like a Russia but not a Russia? Starts with a B. Beinoni, right? So that's how he answers that puzzle that we've been sitting with for 13 chapters, that it's not that you have to either think of yourself as a tzaddik or Russia, and which one, and hold on, won't you be depressed. Don't think of yourself that you are a Russia. If you're not sinning, you may not be a Russia, but don't think of yourself as a tzaddik, because then you'll give up, and maybe you'll have a lower failure. Think of yourself kir Russia. Okay, like a Russia, I have an evil impulse, but I'm not going to let it express. I'm not going to be an actual Russia. I'm going to be a Beinoni. Sei gesund. See you next time. Good stuff. What do you think? I need a hug today.
You're going to